Just check the technology. Yep. Thanks, Tipper. So we're here for the Water Security Management Plan. As you're all aware, that's a potential KPI for Chris, and that was to basically have a plan developed and presented to a suitable committee by the 30th of the 6th, 26. So I'll hand over to Tracy for an introduction, and we'll get underway. We will.
We will define suitable and appropriate at the appropriate time. So yeah, thanks, Warren. This is part of a long journey. Water and managing, responding, strategizing around water is not a 5-minute job. It's incredibly complex, and we never go fast enough for all the parties who are involved. So this comes out of the business case that Council has approved through the long-term plan, which came out through some initial work done in 2016 around water, then the water security strategy, which you endorsed in June last year, the business case, and I did turn my mind back to when we discussed the business case, and there were some councillors who were very vocal who wanted to make sure that the engagement was done well, that people external to the organisation were contracted to undertake this work, such that any perception of bias in terms of existing policies or not having an open mind to the possibilities of what could be done to address water security were in some way, I guess, mitigated. So Thomas has taken us through the procurement process. We have a successful consultants engaged. I don't think they're online listening yet, Thomas, but they will listen in as they will come on. They will? Okay, right. So we'll take extensive notes. And the meeting is recorded for the purposes to help the project. So the purpose of why we wanted a workshop today is Stratton Poll on the 19th of June. You will see more detail around the comms and engagement plan, more detail around the project plan. What we wanted to do today is feel you out. What are some of the things you expect to see in the project management plan? What are some of the things you expect to see in the community and engagement plan? Who and how we should make contact with some folk, and really just to dial you back in to the water security issue. Whenever we have these meetings, it's always the week after or the day after there's been lots of rain, and we start talking about droughts and people go, really? So it's just an opportunity to dial you in so it doesn't land cold and we can have the conversation beforehand. It is a chief executive's KPI, so after Stratton Poll, we will be looking to take paper to June in order to meet the comms and engagement and project management plan KPI directive. So we're in Thomas's hands and Mike's hands, gentlemen, you're very familiar with. Thanks, Warren.
Thank you, Tracy. Just before we get underway, Thomas, just for councillors, Jordan has just sent out the slide pack too, so it'll be in your email there if you want to go online. Thank you, Thomas.
Excellent, thank you. Water security. Yeah, so looking at the management plan, what is water security? Capacity of a population to safeguard sustainable access to adequate quantities, acceptable quality water. It is, isn't it? That's the condensed version. Yeah. Next slide. So just taking a step back, bigger picture, people have always been constrained by water. It's nothing new. From ancient civilizations, even looking at population density today, you find people between, generally live between, say, 700 millimetres and 1400 millimetres of rain. Too dry, we don't like living in deserts. And likewise, you don't find many people in the Amazon forest, too wet. So we live in this niche in between, and even within that niche, the places where the great civilizations developed along those big rivers, with plenty of water, good soils, the Ganges, the Nile, of course, the Yangtze, all of those great civilizations with great rivers and the soils they provide. Next slide. And, and that constraint continues to play out to today. That's not just a past one. We're still looking at, as climate changes, more people are at risk of being displaced by drought. This continues to happen. Next slide. Now, we're not quite on the verge of desertification in the Waikato, but we are seeing a change in the climate, in the rainfall. I put up a few graphs and figures in front of you before. I put up a different one this time. This one is looking at various points around the Waikato, and if you take the driest 90 days in each year, and you plot them over time, this is looking at 90-day rainfall. And you can see that consistent, drop in rainfall of how dry it gets, especially in the last 20 years. Of course, we've had wet years in the last 20 years, but we're seeing more frequent drought. Next slide. So we've got parts of the region where we've already hit those the limits of our water allocation limits, like the Piako, Whangamarino. But we've also got rivers in the region where we're approaching the limits, and we're going to hit them in coming years, like the Waikato River catchment. We're pretty close to that limit.
Can you use your mic, please? Yeah.
Just to the left there, you've got a large red area, which I suspect is to the west of Hamilton. So that's the Waipa. So is that what I'm looking at?
Sorry, I'll bring up. Yeah, I see the spot you mean.
Interested in understanding this above significant allocation.
Sure. Yep.
Somebody who lives on the Waipa and farms on it.
Yep. Yep.
It doesn't get that dry that often.
Yep. Yeah, so I don't think that's the whole Waipa. Yeah, probably is the Kaniwhaniwha catchment, isn't it?
So
Part
that
of the
doesn't
Waipa.
actually make sense to me. So
Yeah, so primary allocation is that block of water essentially has the most reliable access to supply. Okay, so say there's 10% in the primary allocation block, and people within that block generally receive
because I
fewer
don't know much
restrictions.
irrigation out there. That's all that I'm sort of struggling with.
Yeah, and the secondary allocation block is more your irrigation and type things. So yeah, I'll double check on that
Thank you.
particular subcatchment and let you know.
The same point that Noel's made there.
Mike?
Same point that Noel's made there. The Hauraki Plains, most of the water is municipal water, even for farmland. So why is all that bottom in red? Because it's not personal draw. It's not a. So are you saying that Hauraki Plains is using all of the water allocation for all of the Hauraki Plains?
Or are we confusing allocation with use?
Yeah.
Would that be the issue potentially?
This is based on allocation, but yeah, there's a big chunk of irrigation water in the Piako as well, but that's
So, not in that lower catchment though. That's because you can't take it out of anywhere down there because it'll have salt in it. So it's all of the irrigation on the Waihau is from the Paradahuna Road south. None of it is north, yet it's all still red there. That's what I'm trying to understand that marking. Yeah.
Yep. So it's capturing
The catchment.
several sub-catchments in there, and even if we measure it down at the bottom in terms of freshwater outflow, Yeah, but stop pushing
So
up.
the effect up is affecting the whole downstream as well.
because it's going to extend
That's
sideways
what I
down
want to
the
do.
tributaries.
Yeah, so I guess just to help out, this is based on existing uses and existing data that we've got at the moment. So it's not future uses or what you want to do. It's around our existing policy settings that have been well tested, but through the process that Bruce is running with freshwater will likely get retested. This is not looking at use. It's looking at total allocation taken from the system, from the top to the bottom. Yep. So as you say, Robbie, things have, you know, cumulative impact at the bottom is influenced by what happens at the top. I only need that much water. That's how much the system is allocated.
Again, sorry, or are they allocated that much water? They might not only be using this much, but the allocation says that could be a part of the problem as well.
That's exactly the problem. Yeah, and so there is more water sitting in.
Thanks, Thomas. Yep.
So,
So,
and
sorry, so can I ask a question? So talking about allocations of waterway, and you look at all of the blue, below 70%, but the Waikato River runs from Tūwharatō all the way to the port. The majority of water allocation for all of the municipal areas and everything is all there. It's all of that Waikato River. And yet this morning in our meeting, we were told that the allocation of water is lower than it normally is. So I'm not quite sure what this is saying. It's saying 70% of primary allocation below, when the majority of water between Taupo and even here comes out of the Waikato River.
yeah, so.
Oh, sorry, is that not what these are trying to say?
I think
My bad. If
the
it is.
problem is to answer every question, we probably need 50 more slides that sit underneath
Okay.
this one.
Yeah.
Just because what Thomas has tried to do here is take us through things at a relatively high level to paint a generic picture. As soon as we start talking about water, we go into what about this and what about this, and we only need one cog to change in the allocation
That's right.
system, and it all kind of knocks on.
So the further we go north, the higher the population density, the higher the allocation of water and the greater risk to availability.
Not necessarily.
Well, that's what that picture's painting.
Yeah. Well, the higher.
We'll move on with the slides now. Thank you.
Next slide. Thank you. So where has this come from? We had the freshwater strategy that was done some years ago, identified water security as an issue. We have the strategic priorities as a council, also flagged water as a water quantity as an issue. And the Waikato Mayoral Forum also raised water security as an issue. So on the back of that, we did the water security strategy. One of the recommendations from that strategy was to do the next step would be to do a water security management plan. So plan is a recommendation from the strategy. To implement that, funding was approved through the 2024-34 LTP business case, and that's funded for 2 years, this year and next year. And there's a KPI set for Chief Executive, that a project plan, communications and engagement plan is approved by Council by June of this year. So working towards that in this meeting here. Right. So the strategy was completed June 2024. And the water security plan that's underway now, Becca is the contractor that's been selected to to do this piece of work, and they have until June of next year to do that. Next slide. Okay, so how are they planning to do this piece of work? Firstly, scope. So it's not limited to one sector. It's not just domestic supply. It's all the major sectors across the entire region. It's not a plan where we set rules. It's not the plan where we say you're allowed to take this much water. It's not a statutory plan. But it will develop a program of actions to follow. Adaptive planning pathways is the approach they're taking. And of course, we'll need to keep abreast of the government direction as we work through this. Next slide. So this is the steps that are proposed for how we prepare a water security management plan. Simplified into 5 steps in this diagram, and we'll step through those steps. Next slide. So firstly, what are the problems this plan is meant to fix? Go through a process, identify the problems, and what is the benefit of solving that problem? Next slide. Okay, so we understand the problem. Once we understand the problem, what are the options for solving that problem? Is it storage? Is it fixing leaking taps? Is it reconsidering where future development occurs? And as part of that option step, there'll be an initial core screening. Do we really want to consider further towing icebergs up the Waikato River, or are we going to focus on other areas? Next slide. All right, so if we take those options and group them, they're not going to work in isolation. Maybe we need some, to fix leaks, and we need somewhere to store water. Maybe we need both. Maybe we need a group of options to solve these problems we're facing. And those scenarios will be detailed enough that we can look at potential cost. I don't mean, blueprints and exact cost. This is, more low, medium, high cost. What are the direct benefits? And what are the interdependencies? What are the co-benefits? Where might we see multiple benefits beyond just the water security issue that we are dealing with in this plan? Next slide. And so then we bring those scenarios together and look at how they develop over time. Okay, so it's not just a case of, okay, we know what the problem is, we're going to go out and build it tomorrow. We're working with things that are changing, including, central government reforms, etc. So what might the sequence be, and what are the interdependencies? So prioritizing potential investment. It's ultimately going to be risk-based. We don't know which one's going to be a winner, and set out how these should be governed. So then bringing that together, that'll be documented in a water security management plan that can provide us recommendations for water management, land use adaptation, what the triggers might be, the monitoring, the staging for adaptive implementation. Maybe something, so it can lay out in here, hey, here's how we see it playing out, but we know things are going to change. So what actually a result? Next slide. So this is not happening in isolation. There's lots of other things going on, lots of other projects that are underway that are very closely related. We've got our own freshwater policy review, looking at the plan that sets the limits, that sets the rules around water use. that shouldn't be done in isolation. So we need a conversation there. We've also got the climate action roadmap, future proof, another big project with people looking at where's the water going to come from to enable future growth. Obviously, that's related. And then there's the various documents that give direction. It's more of a like Te Ture Whaimana sets the direction, the path on which we can follow. And of course, we've got the RMA reform, central government going along at the same time. So your next slide. So we'll have a communications and engagement plan to bring in not just those other projects, but also in talking to, there's a lot of people in the region that have given a lot of thought to water and how we use it for various things. And, this isn't going to be a plan change one. We're not going to go out and do a very detailed consultation process, right? This is more picking key stakeholders and targeted engagement within the amount of time we have available. So involving iwi partners, urban water providers, hydroelectricity industry, rural water users. So next slide. So we don't yet know exactly what form that engagement will take. Initially, we'll reach out to them, determine their level of interest and how would they like to sit down with us one-on-one? Would they prefer us to join in on some process they already have going that we can feed into or benefit from? So there'll be that initial round of contacts to establish how that works.
At the end.
Yep.
Can we go back?
Actually, I'll come to Jen first. She was actually waiting, and then Noel. Yeah.
I was happy to wait. Right. I was just curious because you say we're still quite open to how you engage. I do hear some criticisms around more from some of the people in the TAs about regional council often have a piece of work and we'll say we're working with on it with them, but it tends to repeatedly fall into the consult category. We've done a lot of it and they're just getting their feedback because we're very set on what we've got to achieve. And hey, if it overlaps with something you want to achieve, well, kapai, but it doesn't quite give them the ability to collaborate, just that chain of and so I see why we have that bullet point for iwi partners, but I just wonder whether the city and district councils could also be determined how they would like to be involved, to give them that opportunity, just since there's so many overlapping aspects of providing for communities in that spatial span. I wouldn't then go and extend that necessarily to anyone and everyone. I just think we're in that governance planning space to give. Nice to have the opportunity.
No. Yeah, you fine.
Okay, let's use yours. Just in that regard, Jen, there are many layers within councils as well when we engage. And I guess it's getting the right layer with the right folk to have the right conversation in this regard. I mean, obviously there are conversations that go on. Previously with this work, it's been at the chief executive and the mayoral level, and at some individual councils, but not others, because that's where the conversations have been owned. And I guess what the experience is as you go deeper in the council, it gets more technical and you start to lose that strategic and community view. But there is a definite willingness to work very much with the territorial authorities, but also be respectful of our different roles. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, just reflecting on that first slide that had the map and all the commentary, that there are some TAs that might be, this is at the cutting edge of issues for them, and other TAs it's not. Maybe we don't have to be entirely equal to every one of the TAs in this area. Thanks.
Thanks, Jen. Noel?
Previous slide, please, Bill.
Just make one note in that regard. Of course, we will have water entities and not necessarily TAs to have conversations with as well.
Fair point.
You've listed rural users, and I know this is a high level, but I was talking with Brent earlier on, and whether he wants to say anything. The issue is rural users. A golf club came to me last week and talked about their inability to use water because Whanga Marina or whatever it was had got too low, and they couldn't water the greens, and so the golf club is practically useless at the moment. So when you say rural users, I'm hoping for a large scope of rural users rather than a tokenism, just, let's get some dairy farmers who irrigate or some vegetable growers who might put unknown quality of water onto their vegetables and the like. So it's got to be meaningful because there'll be a lot of people who have a lot to say about this. All I make. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges on that one, because I agree, but finding the representatives, who are good representatives of different user groups, given we won't be able to talk to, each and every landowner. Who are some good representatives that we can talk to represent those different?
Sure, everyone you
That's what
talk
we
to
need
will
to
say
talk
that
to.
they're the right one.
Yeah. That's
I think what we can do, perhaps, Noel, to assist that is actually wander up and have a conversation with Rudd and, kind of where are some of our more challenging, more contentious, where have issues bubbled up over the last, what is one issue might be a small user, but has had an issue over, an annual issue over 5 years. But where are some of those other kind of pressure points, hotspots? They would know more. They
And the
get
likes of
called.
health and safety, quality of the water, generating power, all those are, life preserving qualities, and whether someone watering a golf green is important, but mental health is also important. So having a bash of a ball might be equally important to some.
I was just going to follow on from that. If we did foresee that there was some difficult conversations coming up, such as whether a golf course is above or below something else, just recall, Watercare did do that citizens assembly for Auckland to have a think about that, and it does seem to be a way of working through issues like that goes beyond the representative democracy that people are somewhat dubious about at times. So just if there is a place in this project where that would be of use, I think it would be worth exploring to answer a part of questions that come up in this plan.
I guess that raises the question too, guys, on how much input do we as a council have with Becca's plan and that the interlink between the two, and how much this sort of feedback and anything that comes from you guys is getting back into Becca from day one, sort of thing, before they get too far down the track and then there's bits that are possibly missed.
If I could just add to that before it's an answer, that is an issue I think that you've touched on that I want to raise in a wider context of council, in that we have projects and we send staff off and they come back with it just about developed. And we might say, no, I think we need as a council to be looking at what are the council, here's a project that we've signed off on, but what are council's expectations and drivers, and what are we expecting from it to give staff a clear line of process, or certainly what council, the elected representatives want to see touched on during that process of establishing a draft or whatever, rather than it being brought to without any input from councillors And then, hey, we've either got to say, no, go away, let's redo this, or, okay, we'll accept that, but we're not happy with it. So, you know, I just want that to have a wider discussion sometime. Thank you.
Yeah, Tracy, I'm sure.
Warren, if I
Got
can
some-
just respond to your question, Knowles is wider than me, but, which is wide. Just your question, the whole purpose of why we're having this workshop today is so you can front end this process. We haven't brought you a worked up comms and engagement plan because there isn't one, there's a shell. But the whole purpose is to get your input so that we can feed in. We heard you through the LTP. That's why you're not looking at a comms and engagement plan, because we are wanting those signals from yourself. And we will go away and Thomas will have the conversations with Becca who are doing the work. Well, there will also be, I'll use them stage gates along the way where we've reached certain points in the project that we will come back to council about this. It won't be delivered cold and ta-da, here it is, done, because there will be certain points along the way to come back and say, hey, this is what we've heard, because you will always hear from the constituents who rang you the night before. So it's really important for us to say, this is what we've heard going through the process. We know there'll be a jumble of ideas, but there will be points along the way that we come back, and we will try to do that in a workshop session where we're able to, so we can have more fluid conversations, I guess.
Thanks, Tracy.
All right. Yeah. So, so with those discussions, you know, we can get some more specific details in the comms plan on, yeah, whether we're having hui or if we're just keeping them up to date. You know, level of involvement are they looking for, and what form that should take. What forums we already have available to us. You know, future proof. We've got a lot of people thinking on this topic, coming together to talk about water. You know, that's an obvious one for us to make every effort we can to bring this up and look for, not just for direct feedback, but maybe, hey, can we go and have a one-on-one with this group, rising from that, you know, take the opportunities we can.
Robbie?
Will there be some clarification on water intakes, especially on production of food or anything really, that product has come out of the region to be produced in the region, yet it's using our water application instead of someone else's? So I think that's quite vital, especially in Piako, where we truck milk from the Bay of Plenty, from South Waikato and a whole lot of other regions that gets produced in Piako, yet the water allocation's not. So you see what I mean? Like there is quite a bit of that in some of the, especially when we're over allocated, or shows in that thing, that will that be a part of the assessment? Because otherwise you're putting unfair sort of regulatory rules around an area that's most probably assets were put there for a good reason at one stage, but how's that going to be assessed? Because otherwise you're going to say that farmers or other users are going to have to lower their water use for that asset to be used, yet it's not doing anything to do with the catchment. That product is coming outside of the catchment to be produced there. Does that make any sense?
No.
Easy answer.
In terms of the wider benefit, you mean, of the benefits
Yeah,
go
yeah,
beyond the
makes good
catchment
sense.
of that water use.
I think probably I don't have an answer, but you've hit on the complexity of the system that we have to deal with and provide for. The regulation that's Bruce's part of the deal, how do we make sure that we are getting water security for the region, as well as working in a system where there are multiple benefits, but it's one of those complex matters.
It's just capturing that information for then we can make it. It's capturing it of what that is, so we can make decisions when we have to, but it's relative to what the catchment is. So what is coming? Yeah, does that make any sense?
I totally understand what you're asking, weirdly.
I'm glad you do.
In terms of kind of the catchment, what's in the catchment, the inputs of the catchment, but what the outputs are and the benefits. So I'll use Watercare taking water out of the Waikato River. There you go. So, and how does that region or that catchment accrue those benefits, even though the majority of the output's going outside of it?
Mm.
Yep. Yep.
Yes.
Yes. Don't need an
I'm
answer.
glad it makes
Well,
sense
it's
to you.
That's the
Yeah.
same issue with
Yeah.
You
GDP.
almost 2 years of understanding your rubbish.
And I think,
Yeah.
you know, we've got that initial step of identifying what are the problems. Okay, we've got a problem with over allocation in the Piako. What are the benefits of solving that problem? The benefits can extend beyond the catchment, you know, if it's a processing industry that's supporting a bigger area.
Katarina.
Like
ponder.
Warren, I'm just, what the hell are you on about? So for me, you know, the word water security management plan, that security corridor doesn't quite make kosher sense with me, because how can you have such a development or management plan when, one, we are talking about the state of the water? You know, is this plan incorporating making sure the security of water is enough for all humans in New Zealand or water or under Waikato? It doesn't matter what the state of the water is. So that's a problem for me, is trying to understand that. Another one, when I was talking with some ministers, was about water storage. I know the Crown is very, very interested in water storage on private land, like farmers who we don't allow dams to be built in because of, you know, so that's in itself is a security plan, I would thought, of making sure that they are not getting the water out of the allocated area, but they are storing their own through rain, blah, blah, blah. But once again, how does that all suit the state of the water? So I have a problem with understanding the water security management plan if we're not incorporating the state of the water. I mean, right now they're trying to make marae test their water. You know, it's not a given, but it's going to happen because we take our water out of the bore. So, you know, so what I'm trying to understand is, does security mean all of that, or just making sure that I've got 100 litres on my land for the dry?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges, because I think for a lot of people who would have done a water security plan, it might have been a water security plan for urban supply to Kihikihi. You know, so that's very focused on people in Kihikihi having enough water. That's not what we're doing here. It's broader regional water security, including for the river, right? The Te Whaimana's guiding document here. So it needs to, we need to recognise it's very easy to fix one problem and make another problem worse. And can we find any, you know, what are the options that can give us multiple benefits?
Yeah, no.
Just touching on, I'm supporting where Katarina's coming from, but coming back to what Tracy said, the issue for me about looking after the Waikato, the huge water take at the bottom end where the plug is generally to Auckland, when I've heard iwi from further south saying they want to ensure there's enough water for them for their future developments. And I think, you know, not only iwi, but I think we all share that same, if there's we can't inhibit the Waikato's growth by giving other regions water. But, you know, I'm one of the ones that say water's not owned by anybody. And, you know, it's there for all to use responsibly. So, but do we not look after our own region before others. So I think this should be indicating that as the Waikato region develops and grows, the potential for Auckland to lose some of the allocation has got to be on the horizon. Let's not, they won't pay for a train, so let's take the water. No, that's just being flippant, but that's really where I'm coming from. So thanks.
It's around that word strategy. Yeah, Chris.
Yes, so in that vein, I think we're useful, we need to be very careful because 20% of the water that comes in the Waikato catchment comes from the Whanganui River catchment. And 10% of the water that runs out the mouth comes in from that catchment. So if we play a regional game, it could have quite a significant impact on us. But that is part of the water security issue that will need to probably be looked at. We did raise it with the Minister for Energy when he was in this council chamber a couple of months ago. And he clearly didn't understand the issue and just thought, well, that's what fast track's here for. So our council should put in a fast track application now. Didn't even realise we're not the consent holder of it, and the complexities of it. But going to the Kataroina's point, so that water that comes in the catchment actually improves the water quality of the catchment because it's a better water quality, it's very high water quality. And so the water quality security is very much linked to the water quantity as well. So I think that is probably a part of the water security discussion. And I think that when we had a previous water strategy, I think Claire Dickey had made that pretty clear. So it is pretty complex, how it all works. But I do just think we need to be careful about overplaying a card of water going out of the region at the other end. And we are so dependent on what comes on the top.
The other issue that Kataroina raised was the water storage issue, and I won't be presumptuous to say we can tell Tainui what to do because I wouldn't dream of doing that, but there's some big holes out at Rotowaro, incredibly big holes that will fill up over time with water once the mining's done and dusted and it's all remediated. And looking to work with Tainui in the use of water storage that could be put into the river if we were taking it out for approved uses and the likes. And that's something that Waikato District were talking about when I was there. And I think it's something that we as a region should be looking at for those opportunities, not just at Rotowaro, but where there are other natural, where we can create natural lakes and the likes that would serve in times of water shortage.
Did you want to speak to that, Kataroina?
Well,
just before I go to Jim.
Talking about that type of corridor, the water security part is around also what Tracy was talking about, allocation of water and how district territorial authorities and a lot of other people have over allocated themselves for that rainy day. And I can talk to a whole lot of farm areas, big, huge farming places up the Waikato River who does that. Because we, as at the Hamilton City Council, remember we gave some water to that place in Auckland because they had they had millions of bloody litres over. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, when does the over allocation of water for that rainy day become more controlled than it is today? Because the Waiho River up at our end, the big take of that water is Coca-Cola, and they've got an allocation that lasts them for about 50 odd years ago to come. So I worry about that as well. It's always been a big baby of mine in this council is about the allocation of water, bringing it down. That's water security for the up and coming people of, of the generations of New Zealand. That's a real worry. And like I said, the Crown's, I spoke to some of the Crown and they are really interested in water storages on farms.
Do you know which,
I know what minister it was, but
was that MPI or?
No, he was just
central government.
someone who said to me as a councillor, hey, I'm really interested in water storage, private ones. Like we had a councillor who had a dam on his land and wasn't allowed it. So, these little things, but
Because I think they have asked MPI to
just
do
those
some
little-
investigations on storage. Yeah, for my understanding, increasing economic productivity. I think is where we're coming from. Yeah. So I'm guessing, I assume that's come from a minister, might be related.
Jen, yeah.
Apologies if I missed it in the earlier parts of the slides, but I'd be keen to spend a minute understanding what you believe and making sure it matches what the councillors believe as to who the audience is of the eventual piece of work, just because it influences, obviously. Yes. Yeah. So audience-wise, is it for ourselves to guide as another strategic direction setting type thing, or is it, you know, that informs future-proof strategy version 3, or
Yep.
is it for the TAs to give the right submissions and signals to central government and funding applications, or is it
Yep.
for community? Yeah, I'm just keen to nail that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, that's depending on what comes out will depend if, you know, if it's a recommendation, the
Yeah.
regional council change some of its policy in the freshwater plan, that's, I mean, that's going to be directed at regional council, but whether we make those changes will be
Is then
community decision, right? Whereas others might be a individual project that relates to a specific community, you know, obviously they're going to need to be involved. The next step of what do we do that? Do we operationalize it?
I was just going to say, Jen, to your point, when we were doing the earlier strategy, one of the key things there was that we wanted more integrated water management, and particularly around drought responses, which is where
the working
really
together
the
aspect.
water strategy came out of the 2020 drought. And
Yeah.
So, and Thomas talked about us having sort of targets or a management approach, management plan 4 times of drought when water security is a significant issue, where we have a coordinated action plan rather than, you know, Hamilton City does this and Auckland City does this in terms of
Yeah, we've seen that.
changing demand and supply. We actually want something integrated.
Yeah.
And associated, and Auckland was a free for all. They didn't have any restrictions at all, but the Waikato, where the water came from, was in restriction. So, you know, if we're in restriction, Auckland's got to be.
I'm not really clear from the answer, but I like the intention, obviously. Just because we just published that climate risks thing for the Waikato, and a big issue with that project was that when you make it regional, it's really hard to make it relevant. And I'm wondering whether we have that issue here in any way. We've tried to work with the TAs and their data, or our data for them, to try and make it really relevant for them by having, like, say, 1 pages at the back that anyone can use. And when I look at this cool table of where the higher temperature, dryness and drought and increased fire weather columns are, lining up to my point before that some TAs, this is more pressing than others. You can see that Hauraki, MPDC, Waikato District and TCDC are like right up there across those 3 columns versus a lot of the other ones, although big question around Hamilton City, of course, being such a large consumer. Yeah, just really keen to see that we do make it really relevant so it can address all of those aims. And I do like that we've gone a step in that direction with this one, I suppose, having enough detail in the 9, 10 or 11 discrete parts that you can then add up to show the interlinkages at the regional level, as opposed to just creating a regional piece of work, which then isn't that useful to the 11 small parts. And they almost then, you go off and do your equivalent piece of work for your detailed bits, which is often the case with climate data, for example. Yeah, so please take that into consideration.
No, Tracy and her.
I think it's a really useful insight, Jim, when you say when you make it regional, you don't make it relevant. I actually think the converse is true for water, because if we don't make it regional, it the conversation isn't the right conversation.
Yes,
particularly,
that interconnectedness is
you
what
know,
you
there-
need.
there's that interconnectedness, and I think it's really important. And I've just called up, you know, the Let's Talk Water work from 2016, and a lot of that, you know, what are we going to use it? What is the audience? It's providing that evidence base and those options for, you know, this conversation around some of our territorial authorities who take more water than they need. Therefore, they're taking it out of the system for either the system itself or others to use, but they don't actually use it. And we've got evidence of as soon as you put in water meters and drop that consumptive use, well, people actually are hit in the pocket by that.
Yes.
They don't need that water, and that water can be used for other means. Now, we don't know what best use of water is, and there's probably arguments going to be about that for the next 50 years, whether it's a Coca-Cola factory, whether it's a marae, whether it's a golf course.
Agreed.
But it's just understanding, I think, going back to those first graphs that Thomas showed us, less is coming out of the sky. That's the only place we get it.
Mm.
You know, we can't mine it and create this stuff yet. I get the yet, but it's coming out of the sky. There's less coming out. There's more demand for that. So how do we get people in that space that the stuff just isn't
Yep.
free?
Ad hoc. and-
Yeah, that's kind of the whole system we're operating under.
Oh, it's critical to
But
do it
as-
regional. Yeah.
As you say, getting the audience right, and
That they can use it.
yeah,
Because I'm hoping that it's not just a solution for mega scale water service entity stuff. It's also for the small scale modular, you know, where is that a sensible thing to do? Which TA would encourage that for their little Waitoa village or whatever it might be? And at the same time with those options that it's not all about infrastructure, but also about the storage in the soil. And which TAs is that relevant for? I just thought if we put a boundary of TAs around it, it tends to allow people the access to a scale that they can comprehend, while between the TAs, we've made the connections so that the messages are the right ones. I hope that was helpful.
and sorry, just the last comment I wanted to make around storage is Mercury have said to us, you know, the whole operation of Lake Taupo is critical. We could start to look at that as a storage facility. You know, that's just one lens to look at it. We know there are many others, but it's part of the Rotowaro, the other on farm, the aggregate. People are moving away from hard structure because we end up with legacy investments, orphan legacy investments. So, you know, using what we've got smarter is part of it as well.
So just an initial up there on the board, coming with iwi partners and the likes. Probably just asked me a question about where does Wairoa committee sit in all this. My concern, putting that up on the board, is within the confines of this plan. We've got the Wairoa committee about to get underway.
So just to be clear,
Let's
the
get the
Wairora
silos.
Committee is for the purposes of the freshwater management review statutory
appreciate that.
process. This is not that. Any conversations, as Thomas said, will be at the joint management agreement, joint committees,
Yes,
not
yeah,
the Wairora
yes,
Committee.
This is
quite
what I wanted to
separate.
talk about, is that you've got silos, but people forget those when they're at the table at times. And so can we just make sure that we don't start allowing cross-pollination through these committees and keeping it pretty rigid?
So can I be really, really honest? We're very clear. If council needs some guidance, we're happy to provide that.
You know, I'm just making an early point because we don't want to be going off on directions sensitive enough without going in directions that we don't necessarily need to.
Robbie,
Will it show where we could be a lot more efficient with the water that we're using? Really? I've brought this up with you a lot of times, Tracy. That like the dairy industry as a farmer, we could mostly, now the government gave us a tax credit if we invest in stuff like that. It most probably makes it more efficient, but like green water waste management, we could mostly halve our water intakes. So by using green water waste for washing yards and stuff like that, and managing our effluent in a better way than just discharging it and spreading on a paddock, and then that's the E. coli that we're measuring going down into rivers. By what that report said today, was maybe it's not just farmers, it's all users of the water. It would be a better way of explaining it, but those are some of the great outcomes that could come out of this, because it also shows that we could save water, but we could also do better management of the environment while we're doing it. That's where I think you really want it, because you've already said that better water quality is also a part of the strategic plan. So if we look at the whole concept of how we're putting green water waste on agriculture land, I'm only speaking on behalf of dairy farming, but not of other industries. But if we could manage that better, that we're only, because it all comes, as I've explained to Tracy many times, if you control green water better, you also increase water your effluent storage for wet times anyway. So if you're reusing your water 7 or 8 times, all of a sudden you put more storage capacity into what you're storing. So there's a double benefit for agriculture for doing it, like dairy, especially dairy, for doing it. So I'd like to, hopefully there's, Pamela's, your property's already got green water management. So there's a farmer that's already doing it. But I think it's a great way of actually getting that water allocation down. And
I'd love to see the council bring a paper to Stratton Poll. That'd be awesome.
I don't know, but it's been talked about for years, and the technology's there. It's most probably just needs a.
Yeah, I just had a look at the MBR plant that's been put in at Tikawata, which is the latest and greatest apparently in the Southern Hemisphere. That's what they were telling me. And you know, if we were to explore mini MBR plants on farms, you could have the sludge going out onto the muck spreader and the water going, dialed up pure, or as close to. So I don't know, but mini MBR plants on each farm, there'd be no effluent going into streams and rivers. It'd be brilliant.
Some microsystems is what I was calling them
Well,
before. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Whether MBR or something else, if you treat it at the source, you're always dealing with less at the community level, where it ends up with lots and infrastructure.
Pamela?
Just as a
No.
quick response, all of those options are on the table. That's part of going through and looking at, including efficiency, how we reuse, all those sorts of things. None of those are off.
Yeah, Pam.
Just noting the JMA meetings, how are we going to engage with iwi that are unsub?
Yeah, so there will be letters going out to various iwi to see how they would like to engage, and give them that option. Yeah, they'd like to have. I would hope those JMAs are that's the minimum, right? If they'll have us, if we're welcome to those.
I was just thinking about Hauraki.
Yes.
For my ignorance, who's WULF? WUL.
Water User Liaison Forum.
So the Water User Liaison Forum.
Can you use your mic, Karina? Oh, no, you don't. Yeah.
And
So
sorry,
that's who they were. Ed Brown runs it mostly.
yeah, so the Water User Liaison Forum was a forum that we set up specifically to also address water user charging. When we were going through the time for last LTP, when there was identified as an issue that we needed to work with the sector. It petered out, to be fair. And over the last triennium, there just hasn't been the response to, shall we get together and talk about some water issues? People have actually said no, because of a lot of change, because of Waikato Water's done well. However, it is still there, it's still on our books, it's something that we could activate. And this is the kind of piece of work that those people would be curious about. And there's about, I'm going to say about 70 sectors represented. And yeah, so we're not going to run a hui just to have a hui. And
Thank you, Tracy. Right, we'll carry on. I think there's only a couple more to go. Thanks, Thomas.
Next steps in terms of for councillors. We've got the strategy and policy meeting on 19th of June. So with feedback from this workshop, bring a paper to that meeting. And my understanding is Stratham Poll would then make a recommendation to full council.
apologies, that was me. Perhaps it feels like a year sometimes. But it was definitely supposed to be November 2025. That was entirely a Tracy mistake.
So, another point there, and then March, that'll be with a draft. March of next year, followed by June, where we'll have that finished document and looking for approval for public release.
So in terms of where does council get to input, a lot up until basically the end of the year is a lot of information gathering, a lot of conversations with people. We've got enough, you'll have a more understanding of the project and comms plan in a few weeks. Then basically the period from March through to June is when there will be workshops on those key points, on those key matters, on things to tease out. It will not be a March, that's it, you won't see it again until June. So that just to give you the confidence of the conversations around how you'll input and check and challenge along the way.
There's one more slide, is there? No. Previous one? Yep, okay. No, that's covered it. Good. I was just making sure that was all covered in terms of that last point, Tracy.
We've got another hour if you want to add something.
Explain allocation first.
You can take that chat offline. No. Jen, you got final questions?
If that strategy and policy committee paper could have a bit of detailed paragraph on the audience.
Mine's not a question, but I look forward to see what you're going to say to your partners. I mean, for us to get over the line as a council, understanding what the security management plan is, you're going to have to be a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for, to make them understand what this is about, especially the community, the iwi partners, it really is going to have to be quite an important delivery, and it all depends on how you deliver that, believe it or not.
Thanks, Kirarona. Any other questions for the team? In that case, I'll bring the meeting to an end. Thank you very much, guys, and Tracy, councillors.